Hi there. Today we'll look at the conflict that exists between Ukraine and Russia, historically, as well as during the Putin era, which is exactly what's happening right now. The geography around Ukraine and, of course, the neighboring Russia involves landforms and vegetation and waterways in the form of the steppes, which are grasslands, which are tremendous for growing grains, um, forest, protection for resources and shelter, waterways. The Dnipro, which runs through Ukraine, is the fourth largest river in Europe. And also in terms of waterways, we have the Black Sea and its corresponding ports. And there are natural resources in that area that include iron, coal, natural gas, petroleum. So it's quite a rich area. To get a better idea about where Russia and Ukraine developed from, we need to go back a number of centuries. Let's look at 862. There was a huge area, a state of sorts, um, that was called Kiev Rus. Now, Kiev Rus was one of the largest and most prosperous states in Europe in the 900s and 1000s. Centuries later, the northern area of Kiev Rus became part of Russia, whereas the southern area became part of Ukraine. Kiev Rus was connected to the Black Sea via the Dnieper River, and the founder of Kiev Rus was a Viking by the name of Rurik. In 1240, the Mongols came, and they came with a vengeance. They conquered and ruled. This was the end of Kiev Rus. Actually, it was the end of many other areas, as you see in the map. Then in 1547, are you ready for this? Russia drives out, or Russians drive out the Mongols, and the country of Russia comes to be. The first Russian Tsar is Ivan or Ivan the Terrible. Russia begins its powerful expansion into Europe and Asia, and this would, of course, include Siberia. Around this time, around 1550, Ukrainians struggled to deal with the forces that wanted to control them, Polish, Russian, and Ottoman forces. The Ukrainian noble, Vishnevetsky, unites various groups into a military force called the Cossacks. And this uniting formed the nucleus for eventually melding together an independent Ukraine, but it did take centuries. To break away from the severe Polish control, Ukrainian Cossack Khmelnytsky linked in with the Russians. Release from Poland occurred, but there was a cost. Russian influence intensified. Under Cossack leaders, the Cossacks joined the Swedes to fight Peter I, or Peter the Great. He was the Tsar of Russia at that time. You see him in this photograph, or in this painting rather. Russia won and destroyed the Cossack fort encampment region in central Ukraine. It was quite devastating. Then around 1734, Russians and the Ottomans were at war. Russians offered the Cossacks a deal for a reason. They were incredibly powerful fighters. Help us, and you will be rewarded. In the end, Russia won, and the Cossacks were rewarded. But Catherine the Great, who was the ruler of Russia at that time, was bothered regarding Cossack independency and attacked them. Eventually, she transferred the Cossacks from the middle part, the Zaporozhian area in Ukraine, to Kuban, which is an area east of the Black Sea. Now, the time was during the Russian Revolution. During this time, Ukraine broke free and declared itself to be an independent country. The Bolsheviks, with Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin, came out as revolutionary winners, and the USSR was created, and that is the United Soviet Socialist Republic. The USSR included Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and 12 other republics. All people in the Soviet Union were intended to be good Soviets, or else Stalin would get rid of them. In 1932 and 33, it was recognized that Ukrainians were too nationalistic and did not want to give up their farmlands to the state as Stalin wanted. Stalin was vexed, and the Holodomor, death by starvation, was instituted, and more than 6 million Ukrainians are murdered by starvation. Now we'll go to 1991, and what a celebration. The USSR is no more, and Ukraine is one of the republics to become its own country. In 1994, part of Ukraine's attempt to deal with the Russian threat included giving up all the nuclear weapons in Ukraine, which they did, and they gave it up to Russia in an exchange for respect and having Russia leave Ukraine alone. In 2014, Ukrainian President Yanukovych sides with Russia and negates previous Ukrainian president's attempt to link in with Europe and NATO. In response, the Ukrainian people revolt, and the Euromaidan occurs in Kyiv. Now let's look at 2014. Putin wanted control of the Black Sea as much as possible and seaports along its coast. Russia attacks and takes control of Crimea, which was Ukraine's southern peninsula in the Black Sea. In response, there was a worldwide condemnation of what Putin and the Russian army did. In 2019, the United Nations formed a resolution, and it condemned Russia's occupation of Crimea. Now, relative to the control that was established in Crimea, in 2017, 3 Ukrainian ships tried to go through the Kerch Strait from the Black Sea to the Sea of Azov. Immediately, the Russian Navy attacked and captured the ships and imprisoned all the 24 members that constituted the crew from the ships. Now, things got from bad to worst, as a matter of fact, ugly. In eastern Ukraine, there were Russian sympathizing separatists who wanted to break away from Ukraine. Putin said that his army was not involved, but hundreds of tanks, soldiers, and armaments were brought into eastern Ukraine. The Russian army that came in were disguised as separatists, and Russia's proxy war with Ukraine began and continues today, with over 14,000 having been killed to date. Now, what's happening right now? Right now, Putin's army has amassed over 40,000 soldiers with their tanks and artillery equipment at Ukraine's eastern border. Also, Crimea has over 40,000 Russian troops. Why? Why is this happening? We don't know exactly, but we're going to find out. Meanwhile, the U.S. President Biden and NATO have pledged support for Ukraine if Putin attacks. Now, where is Canada in all of this? On December 2nd, 1991, Canada became the first Western country to recognize Ukraine's independence. Canada and Ukraine have enjoyed a close relationship since. Our bilateral relationship is strengthened by warm people-to-people ties rooted in the Ukrainian-Canadian community of 1.3 million people. In 1994, Joint Declaration on Special Partnership recognizes Canada's support for the development of Ukraine and the importance of bilateral cooperation. Canada is represented in Ukraine by the Embassy of Canada to Ukraine in Kyiv and the Consulate of Canada in Lviv. That's a city in Ukraine. Ukraine is represented in Canada by an embassy in Ottawa, consulates general in Toronto and Edmonton, and an honorary consulate in Vancouver. Following the Revolution of Dignity in early 2014, Ukrainian's government committed itself to implementing democratic and economic reforms in line with its European aspirations. Russian aggression, which started in 2014 with the illegal invasion and occupation of Crimea, has drawn Ukraine into a bloody conflict in the east of the country. This conflict has placed significant pressure on the Ukrainian government's ability to carry out its reforms. Now, what was Canada's response to the crisis in Ukraine? This was it. Since the beginning of the crisis, we have led international support for the people of Ukraine. We supported Ukraine in its initial fight for democracy and reform. We continue to support Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity in the face of Russia's illegal occupation of Crimea and its support for insurgents in eastern Ukraine. In coordination with partners and allies, we have imposed sanctions against hundreds of Russian and Ukrainian individuals and entities that have supported Russia's aggression.